this is a really important day because it's the first time in this Parliament that we've had a piece of legislation co-sponsored by people from 3 differing political parties, and it's because we are dealing with a very important issue that crosses political lines. I think the Australian public has enormous appreciation for the work of firefighters, the way they put their health and their lives on the line to go into fires in very dangerous situations to protect us, protect our property and protect our communities.
Speaker. Deputy Speaker, recently I met with a delegation from the United Firefighters Union of Australia who came to Canberra to raise awareness about a life-threatening aspect of their profession. I'd like to draw the attention of the House to a very important issue of occupational health and safety as it relates to the firefighting profession. There is, Deputy Speaker, a proven link between firefighting and the risks of some cancers and heart disease. Evidence collected through studies in the United States and Canada have demonstrated that this link is a real and present danger to the health of firefighters everywhere and is in fact a leading cause of death amongst members of the firefighting profession.
Firefighters will now be covered by workers' compensation if they contract cancer as a result of their work. Firefighters from around the nation converged on Canberra today as all parties supported Greens legislation that will now assume certain cancers are work-related.
This is the most wonderful thing that has happened for firefighters. It's been a pretty emotional ride for myself and my family, and I just hope every politician can support it.
They say it's a win for those exposed to cancer-causing chemicals on the job.
Let's come back home now, and the Senate inquiry into occupational cancer suffered by Australian firefighters begins in Melbourne this morning.
For more, we're joined by our reporter Tony Nichols. Tony, good morning.
Well, good morning, Virginia. The Fair Protection for Firefighters Bill was introduced in July in response to data which shows that cancer is the biggest killer of firefighters worldwide. Now, firefighters would like to see occupational cancer compensated in the same fashion that traumatic injury is compensated. Now, already many states across America and Canada already provide this sort of legislation, with 2 countries in Europe also on the cusp of considering a similar style approach. Now, joining us this morning is the National Canadian Firefighting Representative, Alex Forrest. And Alex, why is Australia so far behind in this conversation?
Well, I think the big thing is just education. As soon as we met with the politicians here in Australia and we showed them the studies, the biggest thing that we saw was the politicians said, well, why aren't we doing this yet? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to right a big wrong. Australian firefighters are dying of occupational cancer and they aren't being recognized. They aren't being supported by any type of system of compensation. So the reason I'm here is to show them that Australia needs to be the 3rd country in the world to properly support their firefighters.
The Senate inquiry has heard firefighters are 5 times more likely to develop certain types of cancers than the average Australian. Their union wants the government to acknowledge the link and extend workers' compensation to firefighters who fall ill in the line of duty.
During his 26 years on the job, Ross Linley fought thousands of fires, many of them toxic. When he developed blood cancer, he contacted WorkCover.
They said that you had to prove which fire it was that you actually contacted cancer out of, and you just couldn't do it. Where do you start? You've been to so many fires that contribute.
Legislation is currently before federal parliament. If it passes, firefighters who contract cancer will be able to get workers' compensation.
And it doesn't matter what political stripe you are, it's just the right thing to do.
Canadian firefighter Alex Forrest told a Senate inquiry firefighters are present-day chimney sweeps, covered in carcinogens. He says while protective clothing has improved, it's designed to shield firefighters from flames, not toxic substances.
It is such a small cost, and if a firefighter dies in the course of their work and they die because of occupational cancer, it's no different than if they die trying to rescue a small child in a house when the roof collapsed.
This month marks the 20th anniversary of the chemical explosion at Coot Island in Melbourne. Ross Linley says firefighters have long risked their lives and now they're just asking for some support.
This legislation won't help me. I've done. But as for the future firefighters, we need this. We can't battle on our own. We can't be tossed aside onto the street.
Firefighters expect the federal government to make a ruling in the next few months. Kerry Ritchie, ABC News, Melbourne.
The guys up here have actually set another one for me so we can actually see how it progresses from the early stages right through to what they call flashover, which is when it becomes super hot and super dangerous. And I've just got to say this experience has been one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had in my life. I think I have a much better understanding now of what it might be to be in a fire, although these are actually very minor fires. This is equivalent of a two-seater settee catching a flame and having to be put out. Whereas, of course, in an entire house, there's so much more combustible and the temperatures would be so much hotter.
I present the report of the Committee on the Provisions of the Safety, Rehabilitation and Compensation Amendment Fair Protection for Firefighters Bill 2011, together with a Hansard record of proceedings and documents presented to the Committee, and move that the report be printed. The bill would provide rebuttable presumption that a number of cancers developed by firefighters will be presumed to be work-related under the Commonwealth law. Subject to threshold tests set out in the bill, the burden of proof would be removed from firefighters with cancer. The committee had the opportunity to assess a large quantity of primary evidence demonstrating the scientific link between firefighting as an occupation and a number of cancers. Study after study points to an elevated risk of cancer in firefighters. The research is robust and the committee unanimously accepts its conclusions.
Early in the inquiry, as Senator Marshall has indicated, the committee was concerned to address itself to the cost impacts on employers in the event that we were able to move to a circumstance in which easier and better availability and access to workers' compensation would be afforded. And of course that led to the Chief of the Fire Service from Edmonton in Alberta, with the goodwill of his minister, addressing the committee at its hearing in Perth. There were some interesting points came out of Commissioner Block's evidence to the committee. The first was that there had been no significant or discernible increase in workers' compensation costs to the service as a result of the inclusion of the cancers that were mentioned in his evidence.
The Tasmanian government's being called on to lead the nation in providing compensation to firefighters. A global campaign's been launched to provide compensation without question to all firefighters diagnosed with cancer during or after their service. The campaign started in Canada and has been successful in the United States and is now making its way through Australia.
It's not one fire that kills us, it's 300. And that's why this legislation is so important, because it shows recognition that the firefighter has been injured and unfortunately many times die of these cancers.
Mr Forrest says after 5 years of service, firefighters are at high risk of cancer. Those who've had to deal with it alone welcome the campaign.
It'd be great if this does get up for Tasmanian Fire Service.